What's up? Hey. Hi, buddy. Hey. Good boy. So I saw a video. Might be kind of interesting. It's titled "Atheists Hate Dishonest Debates" by Felicia by Nature.
Have you ever gotten stuck in a conversation where someone tries to prove their point by assuming it's already true? That's presuppositional apologetics. Today we're diving into why this approach...
Wrong. Precept doesn't just prove its point by assuming it's true.
Hello?
It's a argument about whose assumptions are correct. Welcome.
Hey.
What would you like to say?
Why are you gay?
I guess God made me that way. They left. I wonder why they left. Weird.
is not only illogical, but also a complete waste of time. I was asked in Discord why I don't tackle presuppositional apologetics. I was trying to think of a polite way to explain my position without sounding like a complete jerk, which essentially boils down to presuppositional apologetics employs strategic rhetorical tactics that deliberately bypass substantive engagement with evidence.
Really? Huh. I don't see why.
When I came across this short with a...
Is she gonna back that up, or are we just supposed to accept that's true, I guess? You wanna join? Well, I'm looking for ops, so if you're an op. Well, I would say that like Christianity is necessary for evidence. So I think all evidence would be evidence of Christianity.
What's going on? I have a verse that I don't know if you consider yourself to be an expert in the New Testament, but I just kind of want to see what you have to say about this verse because I'm studying Testament and Gospels. Christian or not, it's not that. A Christian's opinion on this verse. I just want to see what you have to say about it.
Okay.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. What's the verse?
Okay, so can you hear me now? I was like lagging out for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to, because I don't want to, Okay, here.
Okay, he's...
I called the Presup Ninja, which highlights why I find presuppositional apologetics
Presup Ninja.
to be devoid of meaningful engagement. For those of you who are unfamiliar, presuppositional apologetics is a branch of Christian apologetics which argues that the truth of the Christian God's existence is the necessary foundation for logic, reason, and evidence. Essentially, they claim that without first assuming their God, you cannot meaningfully justify any rational standards.
Right, so we're talking about first principles, and we're saying only the Christian first principle can make science and logic possible. What's wrong with that?
It's because when you say, give me evidence, I'm going to ask you about the nature of evidence. And you're not going to be able to answer the question because you're just going to appeal to things that you think are obvious and self-evident. I'm not going to grant you that they're self-evident. I'm going to press you on them. And I'm going to ask you, what does evidence mean in the absence of God? What does evidence mean in your worldview? Why do we trust evidence in your worldview, right? So, yeah, in that case, presuppositionalism won't work on you because you'll never engage it.
Ultimately, the problem with
I couldn't because you kept disconnecting, dude. Oh, welcome.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm
What was that?
I'm an Orthodox Christian, by the way. You guys were debating presuppositions and logic and the transcendental categories and stuff like that.
Yeah, I make the transcendental argument for God.
Oh, is there an atheist on the panel or?
No,
Oh, I thought you guys were debating. Well, shame on me.
no.
Could I? How about this? Could I run my argument through you and you critique it and see if it's sound?
Do you do the transcendental argument?
Yeah. Tag, I
Okay.
guess. Just want to see if I'm running it correctly. Maybe there's a way you can make it
Okay,
better, I guess.
sure. Okay.
Huh? All
Sure,
right,
go
I
for
want to
it.
start. Okay, cool. Are there objectively true things?
Yes.
Objective truth is something you would agree is mind dependent, correct?
Independent.
So the stars in the universe that precedes human minds abide by logical laws?
Yes.
Okay, so it's mind dependent, correct?
What? No, objective truth is not mind dependent.
So let's take the laws of logic, for instance, right? So are the laws of logic conceptual?
Um. Well, like, am I supposed to be an atheist here? What's going on?
You could be, or just run it through. If you genuinely think no, I'll justify it.
Well, I would say that the laws of logic, because I'm a Christian, so
Right.
I think I'm.
So the laws of logic would be conceptual, right?
Um. Well, they would be divinely conceptual, so that's a little bit
Oh,
different.
okay, sure, but yeah, but again, arguing with
So
atheists. So
the
if you put
laws of
divine in
logic,
there, they're going to
okay.
go
So yeah,
pedantic.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
They're abstractions. Laws of logic are abstract. Yeah.
right. They're abstractions. They're conceptuals. They're mind dependent, right? If they existed independent in the mind, I would therefore ask, can you prove to me materially the
Well,
laws of logic, right? You can't do it
I would say
because
they're
it's a.
like
Mhm.
they're um the laws of logic are propositions, and propositions are like thoughts because they're about things, and only thoughts are about things. So
So as I pointed out before, right, the stars in the universe that precedes human minds abide by logical laws, right? So, for instance, a star can't be a star and not a star at the same time, right? It has to adhere to the laws of logic, regardless of a
yeah,
human mind, right? Okay.
yeah,
So, but we already established that the laws of logic are conceptual and mind dependent. So that would suggest that there's an ontology of the laws before human minds, right?
yes,
Okay, so if logical laws are conceptual and mind dependent and they precede human minds, you've just necessitated a type of mind that precedes all types of minds. Do you agree?
yeah. I would, yeah, but I would argue it that the laws of logic are necessary thoughts, and then I would say that like necessary thoughts require a necessary mind, and then like because human minds aren't necessary, human minds, and then I'd say so necessary thoughts require a necessary mind, and necessary mind is God. That's there's a paper called the Lord, or wait, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, the Lord of non-contradiction that makes this argument.
The Lord of Non Contradiction, that's his name.
Yeah.
That's
That's the name of
a
the
good name. I
paper.
like it. Oh, it's
It's the
okay.
name. It's the name
Oh,
of
it's
the
the name of the
paper.
paper. That
Yeah,
sounds like an awesome like a handle or a gamer tag or something. Lord of Non Contradiction. I don't know. It's whatever. Okay.
yeah.
But was my argument sound? It just seemed too, I don't know, wordy. And
I
atheists
think
they
you're
they
like.
tend to
I
be
think
pedantic
you're.
on it.
I think you're on the right track, but I wouldn't. I would just change up the wording a little bit, I guess. So
Okay, how
like,
about this? How about this? I'll be the crap eating atheist and you run it on me.
well, I think, well, I can read you the from the paper the argument.
Okay.
He starts with so the first it's got like 9 steps. So like step 1 is that we establish that the laws of logic exist, that they're not just human
Mhm.
inventions. And really we could use, it doesn't have to be logic, it could be like any necessary truth. The idea is
Right.
that we want a necessary truth. And the laws of logic are typically good candidates for necessary truths because, like most philosophers, most people would agree they're necessary truths. But
Yeah.
you could potentially get pushback there. Some um,
Yeah,
atheists that
if I
study
may
a lot of
add,
philosophy.
yeah, so with the laws of logic, what I may add, I debated three atheists because they get really nitpicky over the laws of logic. One idiot said, "Oh, we created the laws of logic," right? Another person said it's just language, and I think the third person
Well,
used a cup and a pen to demonstrate it, but they never. I don't know how to word it to get them to understand that it's a necessary objective truth, right? I got one guy to admit it tacitly, but he kicked me when I said, "Hey, are the laws of logic true at all places at all times?" And he said yes, but then he told me to get F. So I don't know if there's a different way to word it so they can stop saying like, oh, it's just words. It's what they normally say. So I'm open for input.
Billy Bob, are you an atheist? So they might be nitpicky about the laws of logic being like necessary truths because
Yeah.
like paraconsistent logic, which will like deny the law of non-contradiction, which means it's not a necessary. I don't know. So, but
Mm.
if you simplify it and just go, there's at least one necessary truth. Like there has to be, right? Like one of them
Yeah.
there. You could say that like an object can't be like all red and all yellow at the same time, something like that.
Right.
Like that's a necessary truth. And then so if there's a necessary truth, because truth isn't like physical. Physical things aren't like true or false.
Right. You don't derive morality from material things.
Physical things don't have intentionality. They're not
Right.
about, like a rock isn't about something. It's just a rock.
Yeah.
It's,
You
it's
can't ask the question, is a rock true or false?
a
It's
necessary
absurd.
truth. A necessary truth is going to have intentionality and it's going to have a truth value. So it can't be physical because physical things aren't intentional and they're not true or they don't hold truth values. Like a physical thing isn't true or false, it just exists.
Hmm.
Okay, so if there's a necessary truth, that means we have a necessary thought because thoughts have
Right.
intentionality and thoughts can hold a truth value.
Mind dependency, right?
Uh, Intentionality is the key, right? So thoughts have intentionality where physical things do not have intentionality. So the
Right.
fact that there exists a necessary truth means that there's a necessary thought. And if we have a necessary thought, we need a necessary mind to think the necessary thought, the necessary mind, God.
Gotcha. Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Now, when you bring up the mind, I've got this pushback a little bit. They'll say the mind's the brain. And my refutation for that is show me where the mind is in the brain. Like, where is it?
Mm,
Right? Do you have a refutation of that when they say, oh, no, there's no mind? That's silly fuddy duddy stuff. There's just the brain.
well, then again, so the problem there is that like physical things aren't true or false. So
Yeah.
if we don't have thoughts, then there's no truth
Right.
because a thought would just be like, or what we perceive to be a thought would, I guess, just be like chemical reaction in the brain, which is a physical
Mm.
thing. So
Right.
if thoughts are physical, then they can't have intentionality. They can't have like truth value.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, yeah, because as we've established earlier, they've already agreed that physicality doesn't hold any truth claims in it. So if a mind was just the brain, that is a physical thing, and therefore you can't derive truth from that, right?
Here's one way to defeat that. Okay, so
Okay.
um, you could write on like where you are. You could write on a piece of paper the sky is blue, right? And I'm sitting where
Right.
I write on my piece of paper the sky is blue.
Uh-huh.
So we have two statements, right? You have the
Hmm.
sky is blue written down. I have the skies. That's two statements. But
Hmm.
how many truths are there? There's
One.
just one truth, right?
Right.
Two statements represent one proposition. So that means you see how that proves that truth isn't physical?
Correct. The truth that you are
Yeah.
referring to is immaterial, and
So if you're trying to
you
say
need
the
a
mind
necessary mind. Hmm.
is physical, then that there's no truth.
There's no
Because
truth to that.
the
Yeah.
truth, when we have like two statements, the sky is blue, the sky is blue, we only have one truth. So
Right.
we can't equate the truth to the statement itself.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So we're not equating the truth to the statement itself because the words on the paper, that's just
That means
that's just a physical thing. There's no truth to
there's
that.
an immaterial thing there that's true. Yeah.
Right. There's an immaterial thing there that's true, and we have a mind to discern the truth, right? Because it's mind dependent, right?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
conceptual.
the best candidate, yeah, would be like a thought. And
A thought. Yeah.
if thoughts are physical, then they can't be true, and then that's leads to like an absurdity. So there has to be
Right.
this
No, I like that.
immaterial thing. There has to be this immaterial thing like thoughts. Minds have to think the thoughts. There's necessary thoughts, necessary truths, so there's a necessary mind.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way, putting it as thoughts are physical, right? Because you're right. If the first premise, if the first premise is that, or like the second premise is that if all things are physical and you can't derive truth from matter or physical things, that would stand to reason that thoughts simply can't be physical, and everything technically would just be predetermined, right? There wouldn't be any truth in anything.
Yep. I
Yep.
recommend that you can look up the paper. It's called "The Lord of Non-Contradiction" by James Anderson. Is the guy who wrote it.
I'm sorry. What, Anderson?
James Anderson.
James Anderson.
Yeah, it's a good paper. So that will like flesh out the argument,
Yeah, I
and you can
really
also.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right, man. I got other people requesting. So
Yeah, yeah, I'm going to hit a follow, dude. Thanks a million.
you're
You actually
welcome.
helped a lot. Yeah, take care.
Take care. All right, Billy Bob.
Yo, what's up?
Hello.
So
What do
I
you?
just have a question for you.
Sure.
So logic comes from God, right?
Um, it would be like we would say it's a reflection of the mind of God.
So
Yeah.
can God do illogical things?
Can God do illogical things? Well, God defines what's logical and illogical, so He Himself would be logical.
Okay. My question is, how did he create energy?
How did He create? I don't know how He created energy.
But wouldn't it just be a contradiction since energy can't be created or destroyed?
No, because that's referring to like a closed system.
I mean, a closed system, so God is outside the system.
Yeah, I would think God would be outside the system. Yeah.
Wait, so whenever he created the universe, how did that happen?
Well, all we know is what it says in Genesis, right? So
Yeah,
that's
but the problem, I feel like the problem is, if he didn't, I mean, if he did create energy, or the universe, how can there be would you say that space came first or energy came first?
I don't know. All we know is what the Bible says.
Okay.
So the
Wait,
Bible's not really like a science book,
okay.
but
Well,
it tells us that like God created the universe, and it tells us a little bit about it. Like it describes the process of creation over like 6 days, and on the seventh day he rests. So we can be sure that those things are true, but we don't know the details, the exact details, like scientific, the mechanism or something of how he does it.
Okay. Well, that was my only question.
Okay.
Have a good day.
All right, you too. I think he like speaks things into existence. Like that's what the Bible says, right? Whatever, but what does that mean? I don't know. It's hard to understand God. Maybe it's like Thanos, right? He just snaps his fingers. Poof. Universe. So we're going over a YouTube video. Atheists don't like dishonest debaters, and apparently pre-suppers like me are dishonest, according to the
Suppositional apologetics is that it relies heavily on rhetorical tricks rather than any substantive arguments.
rhetorical tricks. What? Okay, but there's nothing substantive to your criticism. She keeps saying that we rely on rhetorical tricks. So why don't you like tell us what are the tricks? Are we gonna ever learn about the tricks?
To break down these rhetorical tactics clearly, let me highlight the
good.
specific issues that were present in Precept Ninja's YouTube short step by step. First,
Okay.
and this is a foundational aspect of presuppositionalism, is dodging the burden of proof.
Dodging the burden of proof. So, I bet they don't know much about the burden of proof. The burden of proof is going to depend on the topic of the debate. The burden of proof might not be on the theist.
When confronted with a demand for evidence, the Precept Ninja and pretty much all other presuppositional apologists openly admits he will deflect your request by attacking the foundations of what evidence is.
Yes, because if we disagree fundamentally what constitutes good evidence, shouldn't we discuss evidence? What do we accept and what do we reject as good and bad evidence? Shouldn't that be important to a conversation about evidence?
This is an old deflection tactic
It's
to
not
shift focus
deflection.
away from the
That's the heart of the matter, because we disagree fundamentally how evidence is interpreted, and that's we as a precept apologist. I want to go to the heart of the matter. Let's get to brass tacks. So you and me disagree fundamentally how to interpret reality. I interpret reality through God being the foundation of all reality. You say something else is the foundation of all reality. So, like, you're going to interpret evidence different than me. So, if I just throw evidences at you, because God is the thing that we use to interpret evidence, we can't prove God, like, necessarily with, like, in a direct way. We have to use an indirect argument. So, we're indirectly proving God as, like, a system or foundation for evidence. That's the heart of the discussion, because God isn't just like a typical fact, because God would constitute a theory of factness. Like, God is the type of fact we would say in philosophy, God is ultimate. Ultimate meaning God explains everything. So God is the type of fact that makes other facts true. So, or makes all facts true. So the way we would like evidence that type of fact is going to be a lot different than the way we would evidence like crackers in the pantry. So they keep trying to get us to prove God, make him like a street level fact when God's like this cosmic level fact. And so what they're really doing is they're smuggling in atheism, and they're saying I, as the theist, have to accept like the atheist standards of evidence and then prove God based on the atheist standard of evidence. And I'm saying, no, we disagree about what's the correct standard of evidence. And then the atheist goes, you're shifting the burden of proof.
Apologists need to substantiate their claim. Instead of providing positive evidence for the existence of God, they demand you first justify the nature of evidence and your own capacity to evaluate it.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Because that's at issue. That's the heart of the matter. How do you have evidence in a world without God?
Epistemological standards that are used, the burden of proof lies on the shoulders of the person making the claim God exists.
Yes, but the burden of proof relies so there's in a debate you have the initial burden, the initiating burden, and that's like, so if I claim unicorns exist, now I have the initial burden. Once I provide evidence, here's a body of here's the corpse of a unicorn. Now evidence has provided. Now my opponent has the evidential burden. So now once the opponent provides a counter argument and says, well, this isn't a unicorn corpse, it's just a regular horse. Now I have a burden. Okay, so the burden shifts back and forth in a debate. So when I say the Christian worldview is a necessary precondition to even make an argument, and if you deny that, any non-Christian position will make argumentation impossible, will make debate impossible. So you have to prove to me first that debates even are coherent on your model of reality. Because on a Christian model of reality, we can debate because the Christian worldview solves the problem of induction, the problem of the one and the many. The Christian worldview explains the reliability of our senses, our cognitive functioning. The Christian worldview explains causality. Can you explain these things on your non-Christian worldview so that we can debate? Because these things are necessary for debate. And then you're going to go, no. That's the proof. There you go.
Not on the skeptic to prove or disprove it or justify their standards of evidence. By reframing the conversation this way, the apologist is attempting to
why should we just grant you that you have like a coherent like way to evaluate evidence? You have to show that you can coherently evaluate evidence before we can start talking about evidence.
avoid defending their own position entirely. Skeptics, by and large, have the stance not that a God can be disproven, but instead withhold belief in a God's existence because we see no sufficiently compelling evidence for that claim. The burden.
But that's a fallacy. That doesn't logically follow. Your position isn't validated because there's no evidence for the other position. I could say, oh, well, theism is true because there's no evidence for atheism, and you would reject that logic, but you're using the same logic to justify your own position. So you're being a hypocrite.
Therefore, rests on the shoulders of those claiming a God's existence to provide positive reasons for that claim. Shifting the...
No, she's wrong. If you read atheological apologetics, it will flatly state that's incorrect.
Focus away from that to how I justify my own epistemology avoids their own need to demonstrate how they know a God exists. It's important to note here that everyone operates with some foundational assumptions about reality, such as the reliability of our senses.
Oh, now she's like smuggling in, oh, we just have reliable senses. Well, we're saying we have an explanation for the reliability of our senses. You reject that. So then what's the other explanation? So atheological apologetics, right? It's the paper. It addresses the atheist critique that both theists and atheists accept naturalism, but never mind. That's Okay, so here's the summary of the paper. So the big debate is who has to prove this is atheological apologetics. So this is the paper, right? So we have the debate who has to prove God exists or doesn't. Imagine two people arguing. Person A says God exists. Person B says no, God doesn't exist. Many people think person A, the believer, has to do all the work to prove God exists. This paper argues that's unfair. Both sides need to explain their claims. So the key ideas in the paper is one, the default myth. Atheists often act like their view, no God, is the normal starting point, and believers have to add God to the conversation. The paper says no. Saying God doesn't exist is just as much of a claim as saying God exists. Both need proof. If you say there's no cat in this room, you still have to check under the bed. You can't just say prove there's a cat and win by default. 2. The Santa Claus trap. Atheists sometimes say, we don't believe in Santa because there's no evidence. Same with God. The paper says this comparison fails. With Santa, parents admit they're lying. With God, there's no clear smoking pew-pew of deception. Some people do claim experience, prayers, miracles, that they say point to God. Atheists can't just ignore these. They need to explain why they're wrong. Both sides need evidence. Okay, 3, both sides need evidence. If a believer says, I feel God's presence, the atheist can't just say that's fake. They need to explain why it's fake. Similarly, if an atheist says, science explains everything without God, they need to show how, not just assume science will someday fill every gap. 4. No easy wins. The paper argues that neither side gets a free pass. Pointing out flaws in other sides' arguments, your proof for God has a mistake, doesn't automatically make your side right. You still need your own positive case. So the bottom line is, believers and atheists are in the same boat. Both are making claims about reality. Just like you can't say unicorns exist without proof, you can't say unicorns don't exist without proof either. The paper...
Legals and illegals,
Whoa.
welcome.
The paper's message, stop assuming one side is default, demand good reasons for both. Think of it like a courtroom. Neither guilty nor not guilty is the default. Both sides have to present their case. I don't think that's a good example because I think the default is...
And the consistency.
I think in a courtroom the default would be not guilty, at least in America.
Of logic. If we want to have
so this video is failing hard. Welcome.
Yo.
Yo, what would you like to say?
I just wanted to say to number 2, atheism is definitely irrational. I'm a Christian myself, and I had a 1v5 last night, and they were crashing out because and some Christians might disagree with me, but I was trying to make a point about God's grace and forgiveness and how nobody is free from sin. And I said that even Hitler, if he accepted God into his life personally.
We can't say that word. But I'm looking for ops, man.
Discussion at all. These methodological starting points allow us to make meaningful inferences. They are not dogmatic faith positions in the same sense that a God must exist for logic to work. Rather, they are practical, testable, and broadly shared premises that are useful for navigating and explaining the world. Requiring absolute...
Okay, so God is useful for navigating and explaining the world. Therefore, there I win. Like, if you're allowed to say, well, I can believe this because it's useful, then I can say, well, I believe in God because it's useful. Debate over.
proof of these assumptions from the outset distracts and deflects from the conversation. Any debate begins with an assumed and mutually held standard of rational discourse. If we are having a rational discussion, we are implicitly presupposing that evidence and logic are meaningful, with or without a God being part of that equation.
That's
Sometimes
that's the point. When we have a discussion, we're both acting like reason and discussion is meaningful. Well, is reason and discussion meaningful on your model of reality? Because it is on the Christian model. And I'm sorry, but if your model can't provide for why reason and discussion is meaningful, then you shouldn't. You're contradicting yourself when you show up to argue.
precepts will challenge the notion of rationality on the whole. If they do, then they cannot use rational argumentation to prove God's existence.
No, because we're saying that our metaphysics makes rationality possible, and your metaphysical assumptions make it impossible.
Without undermining their own position. An important point that many atheists who debate precepts seem to miss. Darth Dawkins is often guilty of this and will often rely on muting his interlocutor instead of addressing these concerns.
You're not even tracking what's going on. Like, so you think people are getting muted because Darth won't address these concerns? These aren't real concerns. You don't understand the metaphysical landscape, what's happening. My metaphysical assumptions make debate possible. You show up to the debate. Do your metaphysical assumptions make debate possible? You just conceded they don't. You just said, oh, well, it's useful to believe XYZ so I can debate. Well, okay. Well, I'm just going to say, well, it's useful to believe God so we can debate. Therefore, debate over, because if you can just grant yourself, oh, I can believe XYZ because it's useful. Well, I can go, well, I believe God because it's useful. Debate over. That's losing the debate. They don't understand.
Additionally, the precept claims of God being the necessary precondition for reason itself requires support, not just rhetoric. This and attacking the epistemology.
This isn't rhetoric, dude. You saying, oh, I can believe XYZ because it's useful? That's freaking rhetoric, dude. That's not a justification. Just because something's useful doesn't mean it's true or good. I could design a super bomb, and the super bomb unalives all people on Earth. So it's pretty useful, right? But is it good? So use doesn't get us to good. You have to say something's useful, you have to assume the good, right? Because the super bomb is useful, but it's like obviously not good. It's to show the absurdity of saying you're justified by useful, because the super bomb isn't good. So is it useful? Really, it's not really useful. It's useful in a sense of like if you're an evil person.
Logical underpinnings of what evidence is should be the subject of an entirely different philosophical debate. When you...
Yeah, I'm saying, Mr. Anderson, I'm saying the truth statements of the Bible are the necessary, they're necessarily true to make science possible or philosophy possible. No, the Bible does not say it's okay for women to have A, B.
No matter what position you take, come to the table to debate something, you assume neutrality on such foundational subjects for the sake of both focusing on the primary topic.
No, there's no neutrality. See, they think we can debate from neutrality. We can't debate from neutrality because we disagree fundamentally on a first principle. Since God is a first principle, there's no neutrality when we're debating God. He's the first principle.
Of the debate, as well as avoiding philosophic sophistry, epistemic nihilism, and hard solipsism. Presuppositional.
Wait, but how do you avoid epistemic nihilism and hard solipsism on your model of reality? Because we think that you need God's revelation to avoid those things. You're just granting yourself that these things aren't the case without having any account for why they aren't the case. You just say, "Oh, because they're wrong," because they would be, if they're true, they're ridiculous. But that's not a justification.
Apologists do not do this. They sidestep sincere debate by refusing to engage on mutually agreed upon ground, effectively shutting down genuine inquiry. Second, the Precept Ninja uses the tagline, "in the absence of God," which assumes the existence of God as a necessary precondition for evidence, logic, or reason to be meaningful. This is an unsubstantiated presupposition smuggled into the debate as if it's a given.
No, it's not, because we're willing to step on a non-believer's worldview. We'll step on the non-believer's worldview and show by your own worldview how knowledge would be impossible. And then I'll invite you to step on my worldview and I'll show you how on my worldview knowledge is possible. That's how the proof goes. Because you can't deny knowledge. If I show that my worldview is necessary for knowledge and yours makes knowledge impossible, that's called game over. You lost the debate. But you just don't want to admit you lost the debate. You're just in denial.
This ultimately is circular reasoning. The precept is essentially saying you can only reason if God exists.
So, again, the charge of circular reasoning. So, technically, circular reasoning is a feature of direct argumentation. The transcendental argument is an indirect argument. Indirect arguments are not circular. They can't be circular. It literally can't be circular. This host is, every point this person's made is wrong.
So you can't reason without first believing in God. This assumption eliminates the possibility of neutral ground, which means meaningful dialogue is impossible. Often, precepts will like to try and counter this claim by saying that all worldviews are ultimately circular, e.g., you rely on reason to justify reason, but then attempt to dialogue is impossible.
Yeah, all worldviews would need a self-authenticating starting point for a foundation. If you, without a self-authenticating starting point, you have brute facts, but brute facts are not facts because there's no context to interpret a brute fact, to say like my interpretation is correct and your interpretation is wrong. So it's not really a fact. It's just a brute fact is really just an opinion.
Often, precepts will like to try and counter this claim by saying that all worldviews are ultimately circular, e.g., you rely on reason to justify reason, but then attempt to smuggle in theistic circularity as somehow virtuous or inevitable. There is a crucial difference between methodological consistency, where we acknowledge certain baseline assumptions like reason generally works, and vicious circularity, where the conclusion, a God exists, is used as the premise.
But the problem is, when you have faith that reason works, that's inconsistent with reason. Because the whole idea of reason is to have reasons for things. So when you just have faith in reason, that's inconsistent within your own system. But when I start with faith in Christ is not inconsistent with the system, and it provides a basis and foundation for which reason would be possible. So that's the difference, right? So Van Til would say we take a leap of faith, but it's not a leap in the dark, because our leap of faith is consistent within the system. Everyone has metaphysical assumptions or a leap of faith. You have a starting point, a first principle. That's your leap of faith. Our first principle is God. She wants to make her first principle reason, but that's going to be inconsistent with the system. However, your first principle being Christ is totally consistent with the system. So that's the big difference. Van Til would call it virtuous versus vicious circular reasoning, or what was the other word? God, spiral reasoning. Okay, because so Tag cannot be circular. When people say tag circular, it shows they don't understand tag. Because circularity is a feature of direct argumentation. Tag is an indirect argument where we're taking something like our intelligible experience and we're saying, what it's a fact that we have an intelligible experience. That's an undeniable fact. What other fact must be true for us to have an intelligible experience? So that's an indirect argument. Indirect arguments are not circular. They can't be circular. That's direct arguments are circular. So it's not a circular argument. When people bring that up, they don't know what they're talking about. When it has to, because we're talking about metaphysical assumptions, your first principle, your starting point. When you start with faith in Christ is consistent with the system. When the people in the video criticizing precept are saying, well, I just start with my faith and my senses and my reason, that's inconsistent with the system. Because the whole idea of like reason is like, we should have reasons for things, but you're starting without reason. Whereas like in Christianity, putting your faith in Christ is like consistent within Christianity.
Methodological consistency states that we treat certain features of reality, such as reason, evidence, the external world, etc., as provisionally valid, tested.
Well, we know that tag is a joke argument because modern academia has just like decided to ignore metaphysics because no one can really provide an answer to any of David Hume's arguments. David Hume's arguments have still gone unanswered. So he showed that like there's no justification to believe in causality, induction, or object permanence. So Hume has three arguments that have gone unanswered that have made that makes science impossible. So if all we have is like human sense data and human reason, science would be impossible. But science isn't impossible. So that's evidence that there's something else making science possible. And we're arguing that something else that makes science possible is God's revelation.
Their continued usefulness and predictive power. It does not immediately assume the existence of a supernatural being that confirms everything. Naturalistic assumptions that...
No, David Hume's arguments have never been successfully addressed. What they have done is they have said that we just won't do metaphysics. They just ignore metaphysics. And that's why in modern academia, they laugh at the transcendental argument for God, or presuppositional apologetics is laughed at because it's an argument about metaphysics, which modern academia has decided to just ignore because they can't handle David Hume. Straight up. They're cowards.
Reason and evidence are generally reliable, does not contain the hidden claim, therefore God. However, the presuppositionalist claim does sneak its conclusion into the premise. This is also another deflection to a related but out-of-scope topic.
No, David Hume was an atheist empiricist, but he was consistent, and he said, look, if we're going to be honest about our empiricism, we don't have empirical reason to believe in induction. We don't have an empirical reason to believe in identity over time. We don't have an empirical reason to believe in cause and effect because we don't observe the relationship between events. Like, he has arguments for these things. So without those things, induction, causality, and identity over time, without those things, you can't do science. So Hume showed that science would be impossible if empiricism, unlike an empiricist, metaphysics. So do people abandon empiricism? No, we just abandon metaphysics. And what Quine, Willard Van Orton Quine, he argues for, and I believe the two dogmas of empiricism, he argues that we should like naturalize epistemology or something like, instead of doing so traditionally epistemology is about defeating skepticism, and so they're like, well, we can't defeat David Hume's skepticism, so let's just science is popular, people like science, so let's just not try to defeat skepticism, and let's just make epistemology like a science. So all they've done is redefine epistemology. And then they go on, march on, acting like David Hume never happened or something. So I think it's cowardly and dishonest, and academic philosophy to me is a joke. But I understand they think my position is a joke, but I don't care, because that is consistent again with the Bible, which says that the message of the cross is foolish to those who are perishing.
Since the subject of the conversation is, does God exist, and not, can evidence, logic, and reason exist without a God? Yes.
But God's a first principle, so God's the type of thing that would make those things possible. So that's how we have to argue it. So you're trying to make it impossible. It's like argue for God, but you can't use the things that God's necessary for to prove God.
You can presuppose the existence of God because you believe.
Argue for prove God, but you can't use any evidence for God. Go. I mean, that's basically what they're saying there.
That evidence, logic, and reason cannot exist without one, but that doesn't mean evidence.
I think you know, Casey Lewis. I think you know.
Logic and reason are proof of the existence of a God.
It's actually, if you look, I'm pretty sure it's a furry. I don't know. Their picture is like a cat woman. The picture on their account is a cat woman. So it's a cat lady. So let's respect this person. They think they're a cat lady. So they're a cat lady, right? No, we respect, if people want to believe they're a cat lady, we have to respect that. We can't hurt their feelings.
It's a nuanced difference, but again, the precept is redirecting the conversation to a different philosophical debate in an attempt to deflect his burden of proof. Third, statements like, you're not going to be able to answer this question, is a preemptive dismissal of a position which undermines the dialogue before it even begins. It's a setup to claim victory regardless of the outcome of the actual debate.
But you're showing up to the debate with metaphysics that make debate impossible, and we're just trying to make you aware of that. We're your friends.
This is a grade school level debate killing tactic.
No, we're like metaphysical repairmen.
Instead of attempting to foster honest, constructive exchange of ideas, the precept asserts that the opponent's position is invalid or incoherent from the outset, killing.
We don't just assert it; we demonstrate it by doing why can't we do an internal critique on your position, but you can do an internal critique on our position? I don't understand. Why are you complaining, man? I mean, cat lady. So like, we're welcoming you. Hey, do an internal critique on my Christian metaphysics, and then I'm like, let's do an internal critique on your non-Christian metaphysics. What's wrong with that? Why are you crying?
Genuine engagement and making the entire conversation utterly pointless. Imagine
the conversation's going to be pointless if we're throwing evidences at each other, and we fundamentally disagree on a first principle, which would be the foundation for evidence. What's the point of throwing evidences at each other if we foundationally disagree about evidence? Why don't we address the first principle foundation as to what evidence is? Because I don't understand why they don't think that's important.
If instead of debating the biases in AI or risk versus CISC,
we have different bias. We should address our bias. I'm putting my bias on the table. I accept the Christian Bible as the authoritative word of God. That's my bias. What's your bias? You're shifting the burden of proof. You're dishonest. This is just rhetoric. Man, that's circular, and you're just presupposing God.
Computer scientists came to a debate and declared, it doesn't matter if you argue that microkernels are superior, you're wrong and my monolithic kernel is best. That's literally presuppositionalism. Fourth, insisting
Literally.
that nothing is self-evident or obvious in the non-God worldview is the attempt to force an infinite regression into the atheist's position.
Oh, but why can't, if we can just say something's, well, God's self-evident. Why can't I just say God's self-evident? Who gets to decide what's self-evident and what's not? Are you the arbiter? Is Catlady the arbiter of what's self-evident and what's not self-evident? So why should I have to submit to you as the authority, Catlady?
If every piece of evidence must be justified by another, you end up in an endless loop without ever reaching a conclusion, which the precept then plans to use his yes God worldview to claim an answer to. For example, he'll claim the atheist worldview must be incoherent, while his is coherent because his worldview stops the infinite regress out of God. The problem
True. So how do you stop the infinite regress, Catlady?
is that stopping at a God does not actually solve the problem unless they can demonstrate that God is the best stopping point, which they
What?
often don't or can't do. Also, they ignore things
It's demonstrated in the fact that you're talking right now. So for you to talk, there has to be uniformity of nature. So uniformity of nature is going to need like a causal agent imposing the uniformity of nature. There's the demonstration. What are you talking about?
such as methodological or pragmatic foundationalism. That is, we can accept certain bedrock assumptions, the external world is real, for example, for practical reasons, because these bedrock assumptions consistently produce reliable knowledge and predictions.
Okay, but if you can have whatever logic, reason, sense data as your bedrock assumption, why can't I have God as a bedrock assumption? Again, you're making Catlady as the arbiter. These bedrock assumptions are good. Your bedrock assumptions are bad. Who made you the arbiter of bedrock assumptions? Which ones we can have and which ones we can't, Catlady?
Without the need of invoking a deity. Even if one claims that a god.
Well, you're claiming that we don't need to evoke a deity, but I think we do. That's a disagreement we have. Shouldn't we discuss that? Why do you want to avoid that discussion?
Of the infinite regress, they must
You're
still
just
demonstrate.
you're just granting yourself you don't need a deity. That, oh, I don't need a god. I can just have bedrock assumptions based on nothing. I mean, listen to that. That's nuts.
Why a god is the most coherent stopping point. Simply invoking a god's nature as a necessary being doesn't just.
Because the only way we could know ultimate reality is if ultimate reality is a personal God who reveals himself in creation and human history. Duh.
Justify that leap that their particular being is real or that it logically holds any regress. The phrase God did it just leaves the original epistemological questions unanswered and ultimately results in a special pleading fallacy. The insistence of nothing being self-evident is ultimately a time waste.
It's not, it'd only be special pleading if I denied you ultimate reality. If I said, I'm allowed to have an ultimate fact, but you can't have an ultimate fact. That's special pleading. We're not doing that. We're saying God has revealed himself as the ultimate fact. That's like the necessary, ultimate. So you're saying God's not ultimate. Well, then what's ultimate that's not God? We're not special pleading because I'm not denying you the ability to replace God with something else. If I say only I can have God as the ultimate and there's nothing else ultimate, that's special. I'm not doing that. I'm saying what's ultimate that's not God. Identify and defend your ultimate that's not God. That's what I'm saying. Because I'm identifying and defending my ultimate. And then when I ask you about yours, you go, you're shifting the burden of proof. Catlady thinks Catlady is God.
That's trying to drag the conversation down into philosophical minutia.
Philosophical
While I sometimes
minutia.
find foundation.
A debate about evidence, but let's not talk about evidence because that's minutia, guys.
Epistemological questions interesting, they serve no purpose in a high-level debate such as the existence of a god and should be reserved for more.
This is so high-level debate. This is so low tier. This person thinks they're high level and they're like absolutely like To call them low level would be like insulting to the ground floor.
Foundational, focused philosophical discussions. In this case, insisting that nothing is self-evident in the opposing party's worldview is irrelevant to the claim of God existing, serves only to derail the conversation, and is more of a personal attack against the opponent than an exchange of ideas, as is the purpose of a debate. Keep in mind, this only works if he's been able to deflect the burden of proof, which is why Pre-Sup Ninja here begins his answer by using two deflection tactics before coming to this point.
That's my ninja.
If he has to justify his claim that a God exists with real, tangible evidence, the entire presuppositional position falls apart. Thus, they heavily criticize foundational ideas, setting the other person up for failure from the outset. That's not an honest debate. That's just trying.
Well, if you want to be a foundationalist, shouldn't you defend foundationalism? Why am I just going to grant you foundationalism? So here's a critique, like the myth of the given. What's your defeater for the myth of the given? Go.
Desperately to score a win in your own personal logbook. Although it may seem to the theist that in my videos I'm attacking their position, I'm more interested in the intellectual thought process of
I'm an intellectual. These people that want to talk about metaphysics, they're just fuddy-duddies. Don't listen to them. They're cute, but they're not intellectual on a higher plane like me, the cat lady.
constructing the replies that I do, rather than winning anything. And presuppositional
It's like not only do they pretend to be a cat lady, they pretend to be an intellectual.
apologetics doesn't offer me the opportunity to continue down that path of interlocution. Finally, presuppositional apologetics isn't designed to find common ground or explore ideas. Its sole purpose is to assert the apologist's worldview as the only valid starting point.
We're exploring metaphysics, boy.
The discussion. This makes dialogue genuinely impossible, and it's intentionally designed to be impossible to have an honest dialogue. Engaging with such arguments just results in a frustrating loop of circular reasoning, bad faith questions, and, if the presup is defeated on any one of his points, goalpost shifting, all while claiming victory regardless of the exchange. I myself am an ichtheist. Ichtheism holds that the term God must be coherently defined before we can meaningfully discuss.
Ichtheists. Oh my god. I can just smash that. That's so stupid. Ichtheism. I don't know what God mean.
Whether such a being exists. If the term is incoherent, then the debate itself is moot. But a presup will insist that a God is the presupposition that answers everything. As you can see, we have an impasse. I am exploring what a God means and if it is logically even possible to exist, while the presuppositionalist is asserting a God's existence and working backwards from him.
I got another defeater for what Catlady just said. Where is it? So she is claiming agnosticism, but agnosticism imposes an overly stringent criterion for meaning that is not applied to other abstract or complex concepts. Premise 1. Many philosophical, scientific, and moral concepts, for example, justice, consciousness, and infinity, are debated despite having complex, contested, or evolving definitions. Premise 2. Discussions about such concepts are considered meaningful and valuable despite definitional challenges. Conclusion. Therefore, the demand for a precise definition of God before engaging in theological discussion is inconsistent and unjustifiably restrictive. Right?
Conclusion. To clarify, my position doesn't assert I know there is no God. Instead, my position questions whether the term God, as used in modern parlance, is coherent enough to be debated in the first place. If a term like a timeless, spaceless, and immaterial something lacks a clear, testable definition, there is no coherent proposition to affirm or deny. This stands apart from the traditional skeptic position and from simply disbelieving in a well-defined deity. It challenges whether a god is, as typically presented, even meaningfully defined.
So lame.
In addition to omnipotence, omniscience,
This is like higher tier debate. This is the so low tier.
omnibenevolence, or omnipresence, depending on which sect of Christianity you talk to, I propose a fourth omni, omni librum. The notion that a being granting free will must itself have ultimate unbounded free will.
This person is omni stupid.
Yet this clashes head-on with omniscience. If God truly knows all future events, God cannot choose otherwise, negating ultimate freedom. For me,
Incorrect. God can know the future and have a plan for the future, but can incorporate human choice and human free will into his plan. Get wrecked. You're faking gray.
this contradiction illustrates why the Christian God concept might not be coherent. If two necessary attributes can't logically coexist, it casts doubt on whether the term God is meaningfully defined in the first place.
I don't know what God means. You can't prove God because I don't know what words mean. One is not false, dude. We prove one on the daily. What are you talking about? Don't be deceived by the deconstruction atheists who don't know up from down.
This is a true dichotomy. You either know everything or the future is indeterminate. In short, I think this concept of a God contains unresolvable contradictions, lacks certain attributes to avoid contradictions despite being necessary to modern Christian
Felicia, you put the dick in contradiction.
theology, and contains unknowable attributes such as timelessness, spacelessness, and immaterialism. Using something that is poorly defined as the ultimate grounding for evidence, logic, and reason is incoherent. As you can see, this approach to theism just doesn't mesh well with presuppositional apologetics. The conversation will never even get started as the atheist doesn't understand the concept of a God, and the presuppositionalist has already supposed the truth of their God.
This cat lady started her whole debate complaining that the presup cuts off the debate before the debate starts. And now she's ending her video going, let's be agnostics, and then they can't debate us because we don't know what words mean. That's the same thing you were complaining about the presubs doing. What a projecting, fake, phony, sophist cat lady.
Concept. Now, asking baiting questions such as what evidence means in the absence of God assumes God's existence.
How is that a baiting question? No, but if you ask, look, if you're saying that when we ask, what is evidence without God? She's going, you're assuming God exists. But when you ask, what's the evidence for God? You're doing the exact same thing. You're smuggling in evidence is possible without God, which assumes God doesn't exist. Do you not see this? Like, how these people are so smooth-brained. Cat lady, come on.
Existence as a precondition for the evidence, which is a hidden and unjustified assertion. I think evidence can and does exist without the existence of a God, as it's simply part of the natural world, something we use to infer things with.
Oh my
Presuppositionalists like Presup Ninja, Darth Dawkins, PMars, and others
PMars!
asserting evidence is a theistic concept without addressing the deeper critique of whether the concept of God is even coherent. In short, presuppositional apologetics avoids addressing its own burden of proof, dismisses the legitimacy of opposing worldviews outright, and demands answers to questions framed in a way that ensures its own victory. It is not honest discussion, but a rhetorical tactic more fit for an argument at the Thanksgiving dinner table than a debate between people seeking honest intellectual discourse. The reason I tend not
Says the person who goes, "Oh, pretend you don't know what God means so they can't debate you." What a hypocrite, cat
discuss
lady.
presuppositionalism is because it's just a waste of time and intellectual
Oh,
energy
cat lady.
because it's not a genuine dialogue. It's a performance art aimed at reinforcing the apologist's worldview. I hope it's clear from this video that I have studied presuppositional apologetics
It's a performance art, says the cat lady.
arguments and ultimately have found them lacking in any serious intellectual capacity. As my other videos are evidence, I am willing to engage in serious philosophical conversation about epistemology, and I'm not simply using my igtheism to stop the conversation before it starts.
Oh, I'm not simply. Oh, now here's the disclaimer. Here's why I'm not a hypocrite. Oh, you realized you're a hypocrite, but now you. So now this is what they do. So once they become self-aware of their own hypocrisy, what this is now, this is called ad hoc rescue to deflect the fact that they're hypocrites, and so they can do a performance art that they're not hypocrites, that they're intellectually honest, and that they're cat ladies.
Like a presuppositional apologist does. Honest, good faith dialogue involves each participant being willing to examine their own assumptions, provide evidence for their claims, and consider the possibility of.
You spent the whole video saying that, oh, we don't have to provide evidence for these certain things because they're bedrock assumptions. And now reversing course again. They're constantly contradicting themselves.
Changing their
No,
position.
she's on it's Felicia by nature. You guys should go sub her. She only has 245 subs on YouTube. Here, I'm gonna upload this to my channel and then I'll tell her I responded to her response video. I'll just finish it out.
Presuppositional apologetics typically starts by denying any valid ground for dialogue unless their specific God concept is assumed from the outset,
That's what you're doing with agnosticism.
undermining the very possibility of intellectual exchange.
Yeah, before debate is a game. Before the debate, let's discuss the rules to the game. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's what everyone should do.
In summary, presuppositional apologetics shifts the burden of proof instead of presenting tangible evidence and will sidestep the issue by exploring philosophical sophistry rather than honestly engaging with the topic at hand.
Cat Lady's dishonest and a sophist. She's everything she says a contradiction.
Relies on circular reasoning that starts by assuming the truth of the existence of a God, dismisses alternative viewpoints up front, preventing genuine dialogue, tries to force the argument of an infinite regress into non-God worldviews by demanding every assumption be justified, then claiming that only their God stops the infinite regress without.
Yeah, you're using logic in the debate. So yeah, I'm going to ask you, how do you justify your use of logic so you can debate? There's nothing wrong with that.
Their own non-circular.
I'm willing to justify my use of logic. Why aren't you?
Justifications. Asserts that their worldview is the only valid option without openly and honestly exploring alternatives.
No, you're welcome to put your it's not our fault that you guys. What's the alternative? This whole video. What's the alternative to Christianity? Like, what's your concrete universal?
As long as both sides approach the conversation in good faith, where neither side begs the question or presupposes the conclusion.
No, we both come to the debate with metaphysical baggage, so let's examine the baggage.
I'm more than willing to.
You want to ignore the baggage and act like there's neutral territory. There's no neutral territory.
Honestly engage with the conversation.
Because God is a metaphysical claim, so we can't. You want to debate without metaphysics, yet God's a metaphysical claim. How is that honest?
That being said, instead of spending hours compiling videos highlighting why presuppositionalist tactics fail, I would rather spend my time deconstructing arguments for the existence of God and anti-transgender LGBTQIA plus rights and offering real, substantive, empirical evidence for my point of view. In short, I don't generally engage with presupposition.
Well, I'll fight for Cat Lady's rights to say these incorrect things. I think Cat Lady should have the right to be wrong. and live Catlady's life the way Catlady wants to live. But like I want the right to say Catlady's wrong, and like not she's not like accepting the truth and the evidence, So, but Catlady, you have the right to not believe in the truth and live your life like a cat lady or whatever, do whatever you want. But, you know, you're wrong.
Apologetics because it's more productive to have honest discussions about the nature of evidence, logic, and reason and the coherence of theistic claims rather than to dig around in the minutia that is presuppositional apologetics philosophical pig shit.
Bravo. That was a good ending. Okay, she brought me back at the end. I thought it was terrible, and then that ending. Pretty good ending. Okay. So it's not a total disaster because the ending was amazing. But aside from the ending, there was really nothing there. But that was a really good insult. That was a good one. You can see why Darth and PMars don't get invited to debates. Aww. Yeah, she was all over the place. That is, to say the least, constantly contradicting herself. I think I'm going to end this and then upload this video to YouTube. I think atheism is irrational because atheism would be a contradiction. It ignores evidence, and it's like a blind lack of belief without reason behind it. So I think it's very, very irrational. It's about as irrational as something can be. It's like flat earth. The evidence for God is that God's necessary for evidence. So all evidence would indirectly prove God because there would be no evidence without the Christian God of Scripture. Isn't that badass? Our God's super badass. He doesn't promise to answer all prayers. God listens to prayers. He doesn't necessarily answer prayers. Flat Earth is as bad as multiverses. It's objectively proven with philosophical, logical argument. But I want to upload this video, so I'm going to take a break and upload the video.